Hello, and welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to stick with our journey in discovering of new pens from China. And I did my unboxing a couple times of my Etsy orders from Pen BBS, but for those of you that have ordered from Bobby, you'll recognize this packaging. It's the same that he uses on the eBay orders that I've gotten from him. It's always been well received. So I know what's in here. Took 11 days to arrive from order to delivery, which is excellent. So let me take off this covering and show you the pen. Oh, those familiar with some of the Chinese pens that I've reviewed will probably recognize the box. Nice brilliant blue color. We flip it over, we'll see the first identifier. Yes, this is an M600, and it says an 01F. And there's another F up there, so we'll do some translations of the Chinese that's there. We'll slide it out and we'll see the classic Moonman box. You know, the same design element is there embossed in silver. It's a nice box, good presentation box, nice and hard. We open up the lid and we'll see the pen. Nothing in the top of the lid. So I was very excited when I saw this pen, reminiscent obviously of a Parker dual fold, the modern versions. You know, it's impressive. That acrylic is excellent. You know, it's layered, it's blocks, nice two bands there. You know, we have the classic thing that you'll find in a lot of luxury pens is you'll have a little tag that makes you feel good about paying what you did for the pen. And as before, we'll do some translations on that Chinese, but you know, my first impressions unboxing the pen is it's beautiful. It's exactly what I expected. In fact, it exceeds my expectations. The cap unscrews. It's about 2.5 turns, so that's quite a bit, but we see an impressive number 6 Schmidt nib there. Very nice section with metal at the two ends. You know, this pen really fits well in the hand like dual folds do. And it does post, but a little bit high, not very deeply. So this is probably a pen I wouldn't post. But it's secure. For those of you that need to post, you can post. You know, your classic cartridge converter. Nice metal section there. Yeah, nothing fancy about the converter. This is probably the low-end Schmidt converter. But I'm going to flush the nib and we'll do some comparisons and then we'll see how this nib writes. But, you know, so far I'm impressed with that material. They did an excellent job. It comes in a couple different colors. We'll show you those colors. But sometimes I'm just in a green mood. And this satisfies my green cravings. I've taken apart the M600 and I've flushed out the nib assembly. This is definitely a larger nib and a different assembly than it's in the M100. And that's an interesting stylized F there, isn't it? Familiar. The other thing that Schmidt nibs are known for is that assembly has that design that the converter plugs into. You know, there's nothing inside this section. It's open. There's just the threads. It's also nice that they've engraved Moonman on the section. That looks very, very nice. And this acrylic is just always continues to impress me. Checkerboard, as they call it. I think we need to get the LED X-ray light into play. But before we do that, one of my viewers recommended I look at the Schmidt website. So here's a look at it. So you can see the number of that nib that's there. It's pretty obvious. And I've measured the wing size, and it's, to me, I measure 8.4 millimeters across that widest part. I think they say it's a little bit wider on the website, but the other nibs are much narrower, and there's certainly no confusion between what size nib there is. So one thing I liked about the LED light is it really is interesting to play that on this checkerboard resin. But let's go in and see how it looks from the inside. It's as we would expect. You know, there's certain opaque areas, certain transparent, translucent areas. It's really nice. I always like to look inside the cap, and there's no real cap liner, and it looks like there's a nice threaded connection there that holds the finial on and holds the clip in. Really well designed clip, really looks nice. And as we would expect, the same type of interesting design is evident when you do the LED X-ray. So what pens to compare the M600 to? Well, the first one is the Kangaroo, which is another Chinese pen, which I got high regards for. And then, of course, you have the remake of the Parker Duofold, this one in blue and this one in the original big red color. And this, I think, was the first model they came out with in the late 1980s. So these are all very similar shape and size, and they'll have similarly large nibs and similar size sections. So there's a lot of commonality among these. Let's take a look at the two Chinese versions first, because the resin is impressive in both of these pens. But the Kangaroo is less than half the price of the M600, and it also weighs a lot more. A lot more brass in it. So if a heavy weighted pen is something that you like, and as you can see, the resin is nice, it's just not as unique as the resin in the M600. You know, it's a good color, and I did enjoy the pen quite a bit. So the other thing we could do is compare it to this Parker Duofold, and I'm using the acrylic version because it also has it's a great acrylic, a lot of depth to it. You know, but again, nothing special, not like that checkerboard style in the M600. So posted, they also have a lot of common traits to it. Number one, they don't post deeply. They're heavy caps, so you can feel the pen. All of the barrels are long enough, from my perspective, to use without posting. So that would be my preference. And they all are extremely attractive. I think this is a very classic design. And it started with the original Big Red Duofold in the late 20s. When we take a look at the business end, we'll see even, again, more commonalities. Both of them have a brass ring at the beginning of the section and one or two at the end, and actually gold-plated brass. These three have two-tone nibs, and of course the Parker nibs are your classic design with the arrow in them. And these are exceptional nibs, as Fig Boot finally figured out when he used the one that he has. And the Kangaroo is a very interesting nib, but the Schmidt nib is relatively plain when you compare it to the compatriots that I have here. But it writes very well, and so does the Kangaroo pen write very well. So there's a lot of similarities here, but you got price ranging from a little bit north of 200 to about 60 to anywhere from 150 to 500, depending upon used, new, what model you get, those types of things. So a lot here. If this is a pen that appeals to you, you need to like bigger pens. You need to enjoy that section, which to me is I would say, a common modern section. A little bit on the short side, you know, comfortable, but you're kind of, you know, and you can go down to the thread, so it's not like you're restricted to just having your fingers on the section. But I think all these pens are very nice to write with. Long-term writers, I don't know, the weight of the Kangaroo is a little bit heavy. The rest of them are around 30 grams as the pen, and a little bit above, you know, closer to 20 if you just write unposted. So you may ask, how does the Moonman M600 compare to other Moonman pens? So I've assembled what I think is a nice representative series, starting here with the Koi Finish, the S1. And these are two M100s, which I think are extraordinary. Amazing acrylics. They're not really acrylics. I think they're acetates. Whatever they are, they look great. And then we have the M600. And also we have a very big price differential. So if this is 1X at about $15, this is 2X at about $30. And again, prices vary. You need to shop around if you can. And this is upwards close to $60. So this is like 4X the cost. So this has a small nib. This has a Schmidt number 5 approximately. And I've swapped it out so I know number 5s will work. And this has that 6 nib in it. So I think we need to take a look at the nib and sections to really get an idea of these pens and how they fit into a series and get some appreciation for the price differential. So I think the first thing that's extremely obvious is the nib on the M600 is big. I mean, it's almost twice the size of the Schmidt nib on the M100. And here I've swapped it out for a 1.1 stub, a nib that I've used in 992s and other Moonman pens. And here is the S1, which just has a unique nib in it. The S1 is one of these pens that are not inked up. When I had it inked up, you know, because I have a lot of pens inked up, I didn't write with it regularly and it dried out. So I just said, nah, I'm going to empty it and put it in a drawer. And that's what I did. You also notice this has no metal rings at all on either side of the section. This has one metal ring between the section and the barrel. And this has one metal ring between the section and the barrel and a metal ring at the end of the section. And I think if you look at pens, the higher the price point, there seems to be more metal trim on the pens. And also I think metal adds stability. So from a longevity viewpoint, for those that may concern about plastic cracking over time due to aging or stress or just chemical changes, then these metal rings would definitely minimize that from happening. Nothing's going to make things absolutely 100% and nothing's going to last forever, but relatively speaking, they would last pretty good. The other thing that becomes apparent when these are uncapped is they're a lot more similar in overall length. So what I've done is I've lined up the end of the section so the nibs are put in more in perspective. But you can also see, you know, the M600 is the larger of these pens, but not by as much a significant level as you would think. And obviously the section is also a little bit thicker. These three are pretty similar. In fact, the M100 section is actually a little bit on the small side, similar to some of the Live-In U pens that are also very popular with similar types of resins. So obviously the ultimate comparison is against the original Big Red. This is not the earlier model that had the one larger band. This has the two bands at the end of the cap, but this one is in very good condition. So they're almost identical in length, pretty close in girth. So as I mentioned before, in comparisons to the modern Parker dual folds. It's a classic shape and design which has really stood the test of time, and almost a century later is still being replicated and utilized in pens. And I put the Schaefer Balance into that similar type of category, where that pen also has created a shape that has survived the test of time and is still being replicated in many newer models from many makers. So how does the business end compare? And here's where, to me, a pen shows its age. This is a classic section from vintage era. You have this big lip at the end of the section. You have a very, very short section, relatively speaking. This is a more modern design section. These threads aren't sharp, so you can really hold it anywhere here. But this, to me, precludes your holding your fingers closer to the end of the nib that some people might like to do, where here you can slide your fingers easily up and down the section. The nibs are comparable size. You can see this is an early Parker nib because it just has a Parker pen on it, doesn't have any of that ornate arrow design or other things that Parker started doing later on. Yes, the pen doesn't roll. Always a good thing. That's really, in my current use of pens, is the most important part of the clip. But of course, when you uncap the pen, it can roll. As I mentioned, this is not a pen I would probably post. It feels really well in the hand without posting. So let's take a look at this nib in action. So as I mentioned, this ink is Lamy green. So as a fine nib, this nib is okay. I did a lot of work on this nib to smooth it and to get it to write to my satisfaction. So it writes with no pressure now, just the right amount of feedback. This Fabriano paper is known for having feedback. You know, I have to admit that I'm not as excited about this pen writing as I am about this pen by looking at it. The nib is okay, but I kind of expected more than okay. So let's rate this pen. We're going to give it an 8.9. I'd love to give it a 9. I'd love to give it higher than a 9, but pens are to write with, and even though this is beautiful to look at, well made, and yeah, you could stick another number 6 nib in there and see how it would write, but to me, let's compare it to two other Schmidt nibs that I have in Chinese pens, and hopefully we'll put this in perspective. This is the M100 in Renaissance, or the brown color. This is also a fine nib, but this is much smoother. I mean, it's not even like it's the same pen maker. And yes, it's a smaller nib, but it has that same type of, you know, not quite as soft as the number 6. So I'll give the number 6 or the larger Schmidt nib the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that. But I enjoy writing with this nib, and the number 6 nib is not something I enjoy. I don't hate it, but I don't enjoy it. So just to put things in perspective, here's another smaller Schmidt nib in the Live in You pen, which is a beautiful pen. It's just a little bit small. That section is about as tiny as you can get. It's a little bit thicker than a pencil. And this is also a fine nib. And like I said, it's about a number 5, and that's an approximate number 5. But this is also very smooth. It's a little bit more feedback than the number 5 in the M100, but this is enjoyable. And in case you're wondering what the ink is, it's Robert Oster Soda Pop Blue. The ink in the M100, the other fine nib that I used is a Scribe Toast. So I'll link the reviews of these other pens that I'm using here as comparison in the video description. So hopefully you'd like this comparison. Like I said, I had high hopes for this pen, but the Schmidt nib has kind of let me down. You know, maybe that's not typical of this nib, but I kind of feel it is. German nibs are known for their consistency, and you know, I'm just again, this is not the first time when I've gotten a larger nib on a pen that I expected it to write much better. The smaller nib I enjoyed more. Such is my pen experiences. So thank you for watching. May you have many great pen experiences and explore. You know, even though this pen doesn't knock it out of the ballpark, it's certainly a beautiful pen, and I'm really glad I had an opportunity to write with it, to take it apart, to compare it to my other pens, and I do think it really fits in well in my collection. So we've reached the end. May you have many enjoyable experiences with pens or anything else in your life. Enjoy every day to its fullest. Bye for now. This is a nice green ink.